Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to my 2025 library tour. In this episode, a continuation of the part of my library that I call Classics, Canonical, Modern, and Contemporary Fiction, Poetry, and Drama. First up is Watership Down by Richard Adams. This is a novel about a warren of rabbits who leave their dens to find a new home elsewhere, as I think that area is coming under development. I've never read this novel. I picked it up several years ago from the Cell Nook at the West Waco Library Genealogy Center. So, to recap how this works is most public libraries probably have some form of Friends Association that helps with extra funding that whoever provides the primary funding for the library doesn't cover. And usually this extra funding is through charity events, membership subscriptions, and book sales. So the Friends of the Waco McLennan County Library System throughout the year collect book donations for a massive book sale in November. Tens of thousands of books. However, throughout the year, there is also, there's also, certainly within the West Waco Library, I'm pretty sure in the others as well that have been renovated or have moved to new buildings, there's a little alcove or a little space where discarded library books and lesser quality donated books are put up for sale for 50 cents, magazines 25 cents, and National Geographic 10 cents. And I think that's where I picked this up. I'm kind of never found the time to read this. And I'm thinking maybe I could read this for my back to school reading project. Because while science usually means science fiction, but since this is a book about animals, that would count as zoological fiction. So could that count for science? Anyway, we shall see. The next book is one that I've had for a very long time. Since I was in high school. It's the Oresteia trilogy by Aeschylus. It includes Agamemnon, the Libation Bearers, and the Eumenides. Excuse me. In this Penguin Classics edition. So the Oresteia follows the storyline that begins in Agamemnon, in which Agamemnon returns home from Troy with his concubine Cassandra. Before Agamemnon and the Greeks departed for Troy, in order to appease the goddess Artemis, Agamemnon had to sacrifice one of his daughters. Now, whether the daughter was actually killed or whisked away by Artemis somewhere else, it depends upon the myth you're reading. But in this case, I think Iphigenia died. I think it's Iphigenia. And this caused Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's queen, to swear revenge. And so Clytemnestra shacks up with an enemy of Agamemnon's, and together they conspire to assassinate the king when he returns home, which is the subject of Agamemnon. In the Libation Bearers, Agamemnon and Clytemnestra's son Orestes then takes revenge on Clytemnestra and her lover several years later. And then in the Eumenides, Orestes, pursued by the Erinyes, comes to Athens to seek sort of absolution. And so there's a trial in which Apollo serves as the defense attorney, the chief of the Erinyes is the prosecutor, and Athena is the judge. And ultimately results in Orestes' acquittal and the transition in part of the Erinyes into the Eumenides, a more beneficent form of the three terrible goddesses. It has been a very long time since I read this. I read this either while I was still in high school or very early in my college years. And I haven't reread it since. This is another play. It's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Edward Albee. This is a play set mid-century. It's about two couples, an older academic couple, a professor and his wife, who is the daughter of the university president, or was the daughter of the university president, and a younger colleague and his wife. And the younger colleague and his wife are put through a very unpleasant evening with their seniors as the main characters sort of fight back and forth in a weird fantasy life all their own. I picked up a copy of this play back in 2006 when I was in Portland, and I read it and remember it quite fondly, although that copy has long since left my collection, and just last year I picked up this new copy. New for me. I think it's actually probably a newer copy, but anyway. Also from Portland, because I ordered it from Pal's, the great bookstore in Portland, Oregon. Next up is the portable Dante in the Viking Portable Library. And so this includes all of the Divine Comedy, La Vita Nuova, and a few selected poems and prose work. I picked this up from a local used bookstore in Waco called Golden's Book Exchange, and I have not gotten around to reading it yet. Haven't really felt the motivation for it. Sticking with literature and translation, this is The Screams of War by Akram Al-Qatrab. It's a collection of selected poetry translated from the Arabic by Jonas El-Busti. This past year, I developed quite a taste for poetry and translation, as well as fiction and translation. And this is one of the fruits of that. It's from Seagull, which is distributed here in the United States by the University of Chicago Press. And I quite liked this collection. It was really fun. The next two books are by Selva Almada. First up is her novel Brickmakers, which I picked up earlier this year and have not gotten around to yet. I have, however, read her more recent Not a River, which was shortlisted for this past year's Booker International. And I read it, and it's weird. I think it's okay. I'm not going to go so far as to say I liked it, but it was okay. Back to poetry with Postcards from the Underworld by Sinan Antoon, which is also put out through Siegel Press, which here in the U.S. is distributed by the University of Chicago Press. Quite like this edition, this collection. Back to the classics with The Voyage of Argo by Apollonius of Rhodes in this very old Penguin Classics edition. I've had this book for almost 20 years and really need to get to it. I'm hoping I will be able to get to it sometime this year, either this month or maybe for shorty September, if there's a prompt that works with this, since this is a shorty. Next up is my lone Margaret Atwood novel, The Blind Assassin, for which she won the Booker Prize in 2000, I believe, or 2001. This is the novel of two sisters, one of whom briefly became a science fiction writer in the early 20th century, who later wrote columns for a newspaper or something. Or maybe that was the other sister. Anyway, there's all sorts of family drama going on. I've never been able to get into this novel, whether when I owned it back in the early 2000s or when I most recently picked it up for my ill-conceived 10 contemporary classics I must spell redeem. So yeah. I'm not entirely sure if I'm ever going to pick up more books by Margaret Atwood or not. Next up is Return to Poetry, SOS, Poems 1961 to 2013 by Amiri Baraka. So this is a collection of the great American poets. Poetry, I've had this for several years, and I've read it at least once, and quite like it. I think I might reread it either in February or April. We shall see. The next two books are by Salim Barakat. Come Take a Gentle Stab, Selected Poems, translated by Huda J. Fakhreddin and Jason Ewan. This is the first selected poetry collection of his that was published in English, and it's quite good. More recently, Huda J. Fakhreddin translated on her own The Universe All at Once, which is also really good. I really like both of these collections, and I cannot wait for more from Salim Barakat. Sticking with Siegel, but this time moving to fiction, this is The Parasite by Ferenc Barnas, translated, I believe, from the Hungarian by Paul Olvari. So I think this is about a young man that has some weird obsessions. I picked it up last year from the cell catalog of the University of Chicago Press. So throughout the year, the University of Chicago Press has a number of cells, usually like select subjects of books. Just recently I got one for ancient studies. There'll occasionally be one for literary studies, science, history. But at the beginning of the year, in late January or early February, the University of Chicago Press will put out a massive catalog sale from all of their all categories with deep discounts. And I have, over the last few years, indulged, and I picked this up last year, and I'm looking forward to see what the University of Chicago Press has for sale this year. hopefully they have an impressive selection of fiction and poetry, which is usually very sparse. Next up is The Saltweed Factor by John Barth. A very, very beat up copy. So, The Saltweed Factor is a historical novel set in colonial Virginia about a young man who comes to the colonies to become a tobacco merchant. And he gets into all sorts of shenanigans. I've tried this novel a few times and have not gotten on with it. Next is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. A classic children's novel about a young girl named Dorothy who goes over the rainbow and finds herself in the land of Oz. Have not gotten around to it yet. Next is another collection of poetry from the University of Chicago Press, although I did not buy it from them. This is Topsy Turvy by Charles Bernstein. It's okay, but it's not a collection that I particularly love. Back to translated fiction with Lie With Me by Philippe Besson, translated from the French by Molly Ringwald. So this is a French novel set in the 1970s or very early 80s. It's about two young men, one of whom grows up to become the author, and or a variation on the author, while the other young man, after their relationship, he abandons the other main character, abandons the relationship and abandons Philippe and goes off to Spain to marry one of his cousins. And so he works in Spain for a number of years, returns to France, has a son, and eventually his marriage breaks down and he commits suicide. And a short time after that, the son comes to seek out Philippe, who has since become a successful author, much like the actual author, and together they sort of suss out what happened and the truth of the young man. And that it's the first part of the novel, which is set in the 70s or 80s, is quite moving, but once it gets into the later 80s, into more contemporary times, I think it kind of loses something. But it's been a while, so maybe I should revisit it at some point. Back to poetry with poems by Elizabeth Bishop. So I've had a mixed reading relationship with Elizabeth Bishop. There are times when I really like her work, and there are times when I don't particularly like her work, and it's a toss-up. Although at the end of 2023, I did a reread of this, and I think I like her work now. Back to translated poetry, but this time from Princeton. This is Final Matters, Selected Poems 2004 to 2010 by Zillard Borbelli, translated by Ottilie Mulzit. Well, this was quite moving. I rather liked this collection. Seed Celestial by Sarah R. Burnett. This is published by Autumn House, which is an independent small publisher that has a distribution agreement with the University of Chicago Press, which is where I picked this up from. I think. I don't remember if there was a sale on for this book or. No. I didn't actually buy it from the University of Chicago Press. I think I bought it from Amazon. Because I think I bought it at the same time I bought another poetry collection, which we will see tomorrow. But this is okay. The Soft Machine by William S. Burroughs. This is a weird novel that I read, I think when I was a teenager. I think I was either a junior or senior in high school when I read this. And I don't think I cared for it much. Which makes me wonder why exactly I still have it. Maybe I ought to give it a reread. After Callimachus by Stephanie Burt. This is a poetry collection out from Princeton University Press. It's basically translations of Callimachus with Stephanie Burt's own twist to it, and this collection is phenomenal. I love this collection. It is so good. The next two books are by Niall Campbell. First up is First Nights, which was published a few years ago from Princeton University Press as part of the Princeton series of contemporary poets. This collection, I think, is most of, if not wholly, part of a collection that had previously been published in the UK. Now Campbell is a British poet. And I really love this collection. It is quite good. And I also have another book by his, Noctuary, which is published by Blood Axe Books, which I guess is his UK publisher. And I picked this up a few years ago from Book Depository, which was for a time, I think, a major source for UK editions into the United States. It's since gone out of business because its corporate overlord wanted it that way. And so if you want to shop books from the UK, I think it's Blackstone's now. No, Blackwell's. Anyway, so I picked this up. I know and I quite like this collection, even though I haven't reread it many times. And I know he has a new book out, so might want to go and look that up. The next four books are by Peter Campion, one of my favorite poets. This is, I think, all of his poetry. Although I can't say for sure whether or not I have it in order. First up is Other People, which I quite like. My favorite collection of Peter Campion's is The Lions, which is the first collection of his that I bought. And it is quite good. I return to it quite frequently. I also have El Dorado, which is quite good. It's been a while since I read the whole of these, though. And then his most recent collection is One Summer Evening at the Falls, which I think I did pick up from the University of Chicago Press, though don't quote me on that. Because all of his books are, I think, part of the Phoenix Poets series, which is put out by the University of Chicago Press. And This collection has taken me a bit to get into, but once I did, I quite like it. Next up is fiction. The Trouble with Goats and Sheep by Joanna Cannon. This is a UK edition. I picked it up, I think, before I was on BookTube, as an active booktuber. I saw this talked about by a number of UK booktubers and decided to get it, even though I have never gotten around to actually reading it. So I really probably should get around to correcting that. Or my next book purge that's not going to be dominated by one genre. Yeah, anyway. Back to poetry with Tinto Tinto by Marina Carrera. This is put out by Chabon Press, which is I think it's a small publisher that distributes with the University of Chicago Press. I know they distribute with the University of Chicago Press, I just don't know exactly it's Chabon Press's, whether it's a small independent publisher, whether it's a university publisher that just distributes with the University of Chicago Press. But I did pick this up from a cell catalog a few years ago, about 2 years ago. The literature one, which fortunately had some poetry. And I quite like this collection. It is really good. Next up is Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll in a Norton Critical Edition. I've had this for a number of years now. One of the few works of Victorian literature I have. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be corrected or not in the new year. We shall see. I will report back, obviously, with book hauls. The next 3 books are by Catherine W. Carter, one of my favorite poets. All of her, except for, I think I have everything except for maybe a chapbook. But I have everything of hers that have been put out by LSU Press, Louisiana State University Press. So first up is The Memory of Gills, which is quite good. Her second collection is The Swamp Monster at Home, which is also quite good. And her most recent collection is Larvae of the Nearest Stars, which is phenomenal. I love this collection. Back to fiction with Cathedral, a collection of short stories by Raymond Carver, which I picked up about, so it's been a little over 2 years ago. Maybe it's 3. So a few years ago, Criminale came up with a reading project in which participants would read books that were published in the year of their birth. And so I picked up A Cathedral by Raymond Carver. You'll see a collection by Alice Munro in a few days. And also a book by Life and Times of Michael K, which you'll see tomorrow, and a book by Salman Rushdie for that project, and none of them turned out. I've had 1 or 2 goes at this book, and it just doesn't appeal to me. I might give it another go before I send it on its way, or I might not. Depends on my mood. Next up is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton, which won the Booker Prize about 11 years ago. No, it'd be 10 years ago. No, 11 years ago, because I think it was 2013. is when this won. So it'd be 11 years ago. This is a historical novel set in New Zealand that has a bit of a mystery to it. I tried to read it shortly around the time it won the Booker and didn't get on with it, and picked up this edition because that edition had come from the library. And I picked up this edition for part of my ill-fated 10 Contemporary Classics I Must Bell Redeem, none of which were redeemed. Next up is a poetry collection. It is a collected poems of C.P. Cavafy, which is quite good. My last reread of this collection was a bit disappointing, but I do like C.P. Cavafy's poetry. It is quite good. It is put out by Princeton University Press. And the final book on this shelf is The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon, which won the Pulitzer Prize in, I think, 2001, because I think it came out in 2000. This is a historical novel set in between the 1930s to 1950s, and it's about two cousins, Cavalier and Clay, who get into the early comic book industry. They create a superhero, and the novel follows the cousins' lives from up-and-coming comic book creators to having some success with that character, and sort of the issues with the comic book industry in the 50s when they were sort of investigated for corrupting the youth and all of that. I had to go at the novel back in shortly after it won the Pulitzer Prize, and I made it some ways through the novel, and I remember quite liking it until there's a certain point that just kicked me out of the book. And so a few years ago, with the 10 Contemporary Classics I Must Bell Redeem project, I picked this back up to have another go at it, hoping that when I got to that scene, I'd be able to drop kick it. Needless to say, I did not even make it past the second chapter. Very annoying. Just... I may give it another go, or I may not. I don't know. It depends how this year goes, and if there are any projects or anything I can think of. Anyway, but that's a subject for another video. So that's that shelf. I was hoping, since I would not be doing two shelves, that these videos would be shorter, but that's not turning out how it did. So I guess this is going to be the only video from me today. I will try to figure out a way to do like tag videos, maybe later on in the evening or early in the morning. And so that way it's not just all library tour. Anyway, BookTube, that's all I have for today. So until I see you next time, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.